All right, so we should see some streaming action over on YouTube in a moment. There we go. Hey, look at that. And I did pull up Facebook and YouTube over here so I can look at the beginning and see who's doing what. Nope, just leave it there. Just leave it on that camera for now. I'll switch the cameras out. The intro's, yep, intro's queued.
And then I will put this up so that I can like the comments.
I'm looking at comments right now. See who's joining. Boom, 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 boom. Hey, there's Jess Ching Cornett, or Cornett Ching. Ching.
It's actually my Gmail. Gmail email's just cha-ching.
I was going to ask you about that, but we'll wait until we'll talk about that off camera.
Jerry says hi.
Jerry? Jerry.
Yeah.
And I see there's George Howell? George Howell? Mr. Howell.
What a glorious day. Daniel Wright.
Hey, there we go. Daniel Wright, Vape Geek, good afternoon. We've got James McGregor, and we have Ron M. And who else do we got over here? We've got Greg Sorensen. Hello, sir. We have Mark Baker, George Howell. I love that last name, Howell. It always reminds me of Mr. Howell from the Gilligan's Island. Lovely, darling. Yeah, we're having a little pre-show. Just a little one.
There's only a little bit of Brian Bone.
And I'm drinking coffee today, guys.
It's right.
It's actually coffee. The lovely Jess, who is manning the controls today,
By myself?
by herself, brought me a coffee today. So thank you very much. Hey, there's Brian Baker over on YouTube. Now, guys, I'm going to tell you just before we run the intro here, you can't see me because I'm showing something I'm printing, that I'm not going to be able to answer your questions right away. So Jess is going to be monitoring the questions, and then as we get through what we're doing today, then I'll start to answer your questions near the end, okay? So if you've got questions, try and hold on to them. Hey, there's Emilio. By the way, Emilio, great look on the new model. Love it. All right, so I'm going to load up my proper page here and go ahead and run that intro. Hey, welcome to Coffee with Rich. This is the Monday edition of the First Layer Live. My name is Richard Cleveland. I'm so glad to have you with me today. If you're with us during the live stream, I am going to be taking your questions closer to the end of the show today because there's a lot to get through. I want to kind of walk through Cura a little bit today, the latest version, which is 3.2.1. While we're on that topic, I hope everybody had a great weekend. I had a great weekend. I answered a lot of questions over the weekend, and my email kind of blew up again. But I did go out and I met a new friend named Roscoe, and he's got 4 legs and a big old tail and a big old head and floppy ears, and I love dogs, so if anybody's got dogs and wants to send me pictures of their dog, you can do that too. So today, let's dive in. I'm going to just jump right into Cura today, and we're going to start with the opening screen. I don't think I need to tell you guys how to install the program, but I think I do need to let you guys know what the program has and what it looks like when you first install it. So let's go over to my desktop. There we go. And we'll make sure that we've got audio. We do have audio, good. All right, so when you first open Cura and you've done your initial install, you may not find your particular printer in Cura, and that is par for the course. Cura is made by Ultimaker, so of course they are expanding the profiles in there because they now have a profile for the CR10, which you can see here on my screen. I'm using the CR10 I have that one loaded, but I'm going to walk you through how to load your own profile. So let's start up at the top here, and let's go and look under File. We have New Project, Open File, Save Selection to File, Save As, Save Project, Reload All Models, and Quit. In the Edit menu, you can see we've got Select All Models, Arrange All Models, and all the things that would go into editing your model. Views, there are several different views, and we're going to get into this a little bit later on. Settings, this is where you're going to add or delete printers or set up your Cura for your particular printer. And we're going to go to printer right now, and you can see there we've got the Creality CR10 loaded, and we know it's loaded because there's that little dot beside it. But if we wanted to add a new printer, let's say we've got a printer from another manufacturer, well, we click on the Add Printer button, and it's going to open up this dialog box. And this is where you're going to add any new printers. And you can see already there's a whole file full of Ultimaker stuff. Then below that, there is a Custom tab. And in the Custom tab, this is where you could put in a printer and build your own profile for it. And then under the Other tab, there is a selection of profiles that you can pick from. So you could pick from the 101 Hero, which I don't know why they put that guy in there, because not a lot of people are using the Hero anymore. There's the Anycubic i3 Mega, very popular machine. At least it's not Tico. And do they even have Tico in here? Let me just look. No, they have the TiVo Black Widow though. They've got MakerBot, Rigid, 3D. They've got some raised 3D stuff in here. They've got Prusa, Monoprice. So there's all different kinds of printers in here. What surprised me, however, is that there were no add-on or pre-made profiles for Wanhao. And Wanhao uses Cura on all the printers that they sell with regards to FDM printers. So for the sake of simplicity, let's first just pick the Anycubic i3 Mega, which is a very popular machine. So if that's the machine we're going to add, we just go down to Add Printer once we've selected it. And there we go. Now it's changed to the Anycubic i3 Mega. And you can see that the volume has significantly changed. Now we can go to extensions, and underneath the extensions they'll show you the change log, any post-processing, so you can modify your G-code there. And there's an update checker, so you can check for updates to the program. Underneath plugins, this is an important tab, because if you guys remember last week when we talked about doing that temperature tower, this is where you're going to find that same type of thing that we did in the plugins over on the older version of Cura. So if we go to installed plugins, we can see that there's a ton of installed plugins here. And we can get info on any of them. And we can install new plugins. We go down to the plugins at the bottom of this tab. That's the one we want to see. Oh, looks like we've got everything that we want there. Let's go back up to Browse Plugins. And here you'll see that we've got all the plugins. And there's that Z Offset plugin. And we can download that Z Offset plugin and add it to our printer. And we're going to do that right now. And we'll accept the license agreement. And the program has now been installed. So we are going to close that out. We're going to go back to plugins. And we'll go back to installed plugins. And what we are looking for is that Z Offset. Where did it go? It is around here somewhere. Z Offset. It should show us installed in there. Why is it not showing me it installed in there? I hate when that happens. Okay. We may have to reload the application. We're not going to worry about that right now. Now we can go into Configure Cura, and this is where you'll do any settings and that sort of thing. Your printers, you can add materials, you can add profiles, you can add all kinds of things. So again, this is just kind of a general walkthrough, and then there is a help tab there, show configuration folder. If you are having trouble with it, use the show online documentation. It'll take you online and show you how to use it. You can report bugs, and there's about the software. But let's move over to where all the business really happens. When you first open up the program, you're going to be greeted with the recommended settings. Now, this is just some really basic settings. So here we've got a layer height of 0.2. Our slower to faster. If we want to go to 0.4, we just take that little slider and go right to 0.4. The infill is set to 25%. We can enable gradual, and gradual infill will gradually increase the amount of infill towards the top of the model. We want to generate supports. So if this is checked, it's going to generate structures to support parts of the model which have overhangs. Without these structures, such parts would collapse during the printing. And we can see that in some of our prints when we have that little bit of falling or poor bridging. And then plate adhesion. Enable printing of a brim or a raft. This will add a flat area around underneath your object, which is easy to cut off afterwards and most of you guys already know what a brim and a raft is. So now if we loaded a model, let's see if I've got a model I can load. Let's go to my downloads. I may have a model in here somewhere. Oh, there's Marvin Fett. Let's do the Marvin Fett head and legs. So it's going to load up these two pieces of the model. We can zoom in. I want to zoom, there we go. So we have the legs and the head. This is a little Marvin Fett or Boba Fett keychain that's done in the thing of Marvin. Oh yeah, I guess I'm in the way here, aren't I? There we go. Now we can see him. So we've got Marvin's head and his two little feet there. And you'll notice right away, based on the settings that we've already set over here, that this particular keychain is going to take 26 minutes to print. If we're fine with that, we can also get a cost to print this as well if we set up those parameters in our preferences. We're going to go into more detail on that on Wednesday, and I'm going to show you guys that on Wednesday as well. Right now, it's just kind of a walkthrough to get you familiar with where stuff is as compared to the older version of Cura. So we can see that we can do a cost analysis. We can find out exactly how much material, cost-wise, we're going to use to make Marvin. So that's all well and good. However, let's go to custom, because that's where we can make all of our change. You can see once we move to custom, there's a whole lot of things that we can change in here. Let's start with quality. We're going to open up the quality tab, and right now we can see our layer height is set at 0.2 millimeters, which is pretty much the general setting for most slicers when you're creating a model. Unless you're doing something with a lot of really fine detail, 0.2 is going to be the layer height that you use most often. I find that's the one I use no matter what I'm printing. And just to kind of give you guys a rough go through of what it says here, layer height, the height of each layer in millimeters. Higher values produce faster prints, lower resolution. Lower values produce slower prints with much higher resolution. So the effects are it affects your top layers, your bottom layers, your infill layer thickness, your minimum skin width of for expansion, regular fan speed at the layer, support infill, layer thickness, your raft top layer thickness, your raft middle layer thickness, and your prime tower thickness, okay? So that's what that does. Now let's go to shell. If we go into shell, we can see that our wall thickness, we're treated with a 1.2 millimeters. Now we know that our nozzle on our printer is 0.4 millimeters. So what this number represents is 3 times the width of our nozzle. So if we are using a 0.4 millimeter nozzle, times that by 3, it's going to give us 1.2 millimeters in width, okay? And that is our wall thickness. So essentially it's doing 3 walls. Now our top and bottom thickness is 1.2 as well. Now that is a different multiplier based on the multiplier of our layer height. So if our bottom thickness is 1.2, we are now timesing that by 6. So essentially we have 6 bottom layers and 6 top layers. You see where I'm going with this? So the thickness of the top and bottom layers in the print, this value divided by the layer height, we know that is 0.2, and that defines the number of top and bottom layers, okay? And what's that? Will more what?
Question for me and Lang on Facebook.
Okay.
Will more clicks do the same thing?
Will more clicks do the same thing? I don't quite understand what more clicks means.
It's a bit contextual, and I don't know what you guys were talking about when you wrote it.
Will a higher number? Remember, you're always going to divide or times that number of how many layers you want. If you want 7 layers, you're going to times that by 0.2, and that will give you, if you want 8 layers, times by 0.2, the number of layers that you want. And that will give you that millimeter value. Does that make sense?
We're going to ask you to clarify the question.
Okay, so let's go to, we'll move to infill. In this case, we have our infill density. This adjusts the density of the infill of the print. So in this case, it affects the top layers, the bottom layers, the infill line distance, infill pattern, infill overlap percentage, and the infill overlap itself. Right now we have this set to 25%, which is, in all honesty, kind of high for most things that you're going to print. I think that the higher the infill, the more plastic you potentially waste, depending on what you're printing. We are printing over on the CR10 out on the floor right now. We are printing an EL blaster, and that looks great. We're printing an EL blaster right now, an EL11 or an E11 blaster from Star Wars. It's a stormtrooper gun, and the infill I've set on that was around 30% because it's going to get handled a lot. While we're at the Calgary Comic and Entertainment Expo, people are going to be picking it up. I wanted to make sure that there was enough density in there that it could handle people picking it up, putting it down, potentially dropping it, which we've had happen at other shows where people have dropped stuff. But for the most part, I usually only use about 10% infill on most things, depending on what kind of strength I want to. Gradual infill steps we're going to leave to 0 right now. Let's go into material. Any more questions while I'm moving along here?
He's having some issues here again. And he said, we asked him to clarify the question. He says, in regards to the menu at the side, it's all accordion, whereas the old one was out in front. I'm not sure.
Yeah, this is.
What she's talking about.
I know what you're talking about. Yes, this is accordion. So when you hit that down arrow, it drops down and opens up for you.
We call those drop-down menus.
Yeah, it's drop-down menus or accordion, depending on where you are in the world. So I've just closed them all up. You'll see there's also a little eye beside some of them. That is going to give you more information about the infill. Okay, so let's go down to material. In this case, because we're using PLA and we're just using the stock settings of PLA, the printing temperature is set to 200. And our bed or our build plate temperature is set to 60. And that's pretty standard across the board as we're going. Our diameter of our filament is 1.75 and our flow is 100%. And we are, in this case, going to enable retraction. Now, let's just go back up and we'll talk about some of the things that are on the flyouts from these. So the printing temperature is the temperature used for printing. We all know that. This affects the printing temperature, initial layer, initial printing temperature, and final printing temperature, okay? And it's affected by the default printing temperature by whatever you've set up as your default for that material. Now your build plate temperature is the temperature used for the heated build plate, and this is 0, the bed temperature, pardon me, let me go back there. This is the bed temperature, will not be adjusted. So if you set your build plate to 0 or you don't have a heated bed, then you want to set that to 0. But otherwise, if you're using PLA, I always have mine right around 50, 60, somewhere in there. And this affects the build plate temperature initial layer. The diameter, this is adjusted by the diameter of your filament. Match this value to the diameter of the filament that you're using, okay? And flow, this is one that confuses people quite a bit. Flow compensation is the amount of material extruded is multiplied by this value. So this is the prime tower flow. This is the amount of flow that is going to come out. 100% of the material is going to come out as it's extruding, okay? And now enabling retraction, retract the filament when the nozzle is moving over a non-printed area. The reason this is important is because when you are doing that sort of thing, it's not going to leave a lot of stringing. You can avoid stringing by having your retraction set up correctly. All right, so we're going to close that menu. Let's move on to speed. Now remember, today is just a very quick look at Cura. We're not going to get into too deep of this. We are going to get deeper on Wednesday, okay? So now we're into the speed, and we're starting with print speed, then your travel speed, your print acceleration, your travel acceleration, your print jerk, and your travel jerk. Let's start with print speed. Right now we are printing at default of 50 millimeters per second. So the print speed, this is the speed in which printing happens. So it's moving fairly fast. This affects the infill speed, the wall speed, the top and bottom speed, the support speed, the prime tower speed, the travel speed, the initial layer speed, the initial layer travel speed, and the raft print speed. Okay, so let's move down to travel speed. This is the speed at which the head is moving from object to object on the bed. And this affects your initial layer travel speed, and it's affected by spiralized outer contour. And we're talking about spiralized printing a little bit later on, and then the print speed as well. So print acceleration, the acceleration with which printing happens. Now this affects the infill acceleration, wall acceleration, top and bottom, support, prime tower, travel, initial layer travel, and raft printing as well. And you can see here our travel, or our print acceleration, is set at 2,000 millimeters per second. That is moving really fast. You may want to drop that down. You'll notice that when we look at print and travel speed, our travel speed is 100 millimeters per second. It's basically double what our printing speed is. So it's jumping from one point to another very quickly on the print, or on the model in which we are printing. All right, so now we've got print jerk and travel jerk. So print jerk is the maximum instantaneous velocity change of the print head. So what that means, let's say this is our print head. You guys can see me down in the bottom corner, and it's traveling along that x-axis. That jerk, when it's traveling at 50 millimeters per second, it's not stopping on a dime. It's going to still, that forward momentum is going to want to still push it a little bit forward. So that's where that jerk compensation comes in. If it's set too high, it's going to have too much travel in that jerk. And you're going to see that in your print by the ringing that you see on some of your prints around some areas. You'll see it mostly on the areas of text on your print. You'll also see it on anything that's got an overhang or an archway. The Benchy is a really good example of that. In this case, we don't have a lot, but we can see a little bit. But I've got that machine tuned in. So that's where you're going to see a lot of that ringing. So what you may want to do on that print jerk is you may want to drop that down to roughly around 8 millimeters per second. That's where I have mine. Sometimes I actually have mine down as low as 5, so that it does help to make that stop a little smoother and you don't get that ringing, okay? And travel jerk is just the jerk of traveling from one point to another. Again, it's not going to stop on a dime, and you can drop that down as well if you so choose. So now let's go to cooling, which is the next one on our list. In cooling, do we want to enable print cooling? For PLA, absolutely. So we want to make sure that that is checked. Now, enabling the print cooling enables the printer cooling fans while printing. Now, the fans improve print quality on the layers with short layer times and bridging and overhang. So what this is doing with PLA is it's blowing some air down on the PLA as it's being laid down. Once that happens, it is actually binding to it's kind of coming out hot, but it's cooling as it binds to the layer underneath it. I hope that made sense. Support. Now, we can generate support, and we can talk about support placement. When we go to generate supports, we generate structures to support parts of a model which have overhangs. Without these structures, such parts would collapse during printing. And we talked a little bit about that earlier. And here's a good example of a model. I can't go to my overhead, unfortunately, but we've got a small model here because my overhead is over there. So I can't go to my overhead. So we've got a small model here that's got a lot of support material in it. And because this model is so small, this is a figure for D&D, because this model is so small, it's hard to get those supports out of there. And we're going to talk about some of the way that supports can be done on Wednesday as well. So generating supports, we talked a little bit about that. In this case, we want to generate supports. If you hit this little, what looks like a chain, these settings are shared between all extruders. Changing it will have a change value for all the extruders, okay? So in this case, we only have one extruder. We're not dealing with multiple extruders. Now, support placement. We have touching the build plate and everywhere. Let's look at the flyout for this. This adjusts the placement of the support structures. The placement can be set to touching build plate or everywhere. When set to everywhere, the support structure will also be printed on the model, just like on this little guy, where there's a lot of support material in areas that are a little tough to get at. And this also affects the support distance, okay? So there we go. We're gonna move on to bed adhesion or build plate adhesion. Now we have several different ones here that we can look at. We have a skirt, we have a brim, we have a raft, and none. So let's talk a little bit about the flyout here. Different options that help to improve both priming your extrusion and adhesion to the build plate. Brim adds a single layer flat area around the base of your model to prevent warping. A raft adds a thick grid with a roof below the model. So what this is going to do is it's going to create a bed of plastic and then start to build your model on top of that. Okay. The skirt is a line printed around the model but not connected to the model. So if you're trying to prime your nozzle, if you're doing a fairly big flat piece like a vase, I will usually always do a skirt on anything that I print just so that I can get that nozzle primed. It also shows me another thing as well. It'll show me if my bed is out of whack a little bit, and then I can just do micro adjustments on my bed. So it's always a good thing to at least do a skirt around your model. It's a little bit of wasted plastic, but it's not a ton. Again, if we go to a brim, what's that is going to do is it's going to lay out lines that will work its way in to where your model starts. And if you're doing something very thin, we'll use this pen as an example. It's a very thin piece. Because it's rounded, it doesn't have a lot of surface area that's going to be on the build plate. So I would use a brim around this pen. And I may even put it on a raft. And then we've got special modes. Print sequence, you can do all at once or one at a time. And most slicers are now going to allow you to do pieces one at a time or all at once. If you do them all at once, it may slow down your printer. This is a good example. This Death Star Raspberry Pi case was printed all at once. So it did a little bit here, then it did a little bit here, then it went back and went back and forth until it built it up to the same height. If we asked it to print this one at a time, it would have printed one side first, then gone back and printed the other side. Where this becomes dangerous is if you have very high models. Because if your printer is trying to go back to this area to print this after it's printed this, you may be running into your X gantry, which is that gantry that goes across from left to right, where your extruder head is built on. And you may not be able to hit the plate because of the placement of this, especially if you're dealing with a smaller printer. So usually what I'll do is I'll leave this all at once, okay? So that pretty much gives us a quick overview of what Cura is all about. Now I'm going to go back and start looking at some questions here so I can see them. We're going to open up here. All right. So, go down. Ian Lang, printing for D&D is a show on its own for sure. Absolutely it is, Ian. That is correct. Is there one single button to expand them all at the same time? No, you have to expand them all separately. In regards to the menu at the side, it's all accordion. Yes, we answered that question. Have you guys gone back to my camera?
Oh, we did a couple times. It looked like you wanted to stay there because you started opening up the menus and stuff, so I kind of left it over there.
No, I'm going back here. Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, let's get back to questions here. The Z offset modifier is built in under extensions, I believe. Yes, it is. And like I said, on Wednesday, I'm going to be walking you in depth, much like I did with the temperature tower that we did last week in Cura. Do you remember how we talked about it? Same thing like we did with the painting. We started with some walkthrough, then we did the actual painting, then we did the finish up. And that's what we're going to do here with Cura. Today was just kind of a walkthrough. So if you've got any other questions after we finish the stream today, I want you to put them down into the comments below, and I'm going to address those questions on the Wednesday show, which I'll be recording tomorrow, by the way. Just really quickly, Wednesday, again, we are going to be doing more on Cura. We're going to go a little bit more in depth. We're going to slice a model. We're going to go through those different settings. We're actually going to set up the Wanhao Duplicator i3. So we're going to take you through that step by step as well. And that's going to be the same for any printer that is not in the Cura profiles, okay? We're also going to show you how to get to that temperature tower as well on Wednesday.
Some questions there on YouTube from Ron. There's a couple of comments about Octopi or Octoprint and their latest update.
Octoprint and their latest update. Let me... What's new in Octoprint? I just deployed the latest Octopi last night after a hiatus. Brian, I really don't know what's new in Octoprint right now. I have to look into that because I haven't used Octoprint in a while, to be honest with you. So I am going to have to look into that. Maybe we'll tackle that on a future show. Hopefully you guys can come back for that, and we'll make announcements when we're going to cover Octopi or Octoprint very soon. You know, the best tutorials on Octopi right now are done by Joe Michael Tenaglia, JMT on YouTube. Great guy. Make sure you go and check out his. They are a little bit older, but all the information is there. Just wanted to let you know that the CR10S is working great. Well, thank you very much.
CR10.
Darren, yeah, I will relay that to Derek. The CR10S, you know, funny thing about that machine, I got mine It's at my home right now. It has been printing non-stop for the last 125 hours. And it's still not finished. I am putting this thing through its paces, so if it blows up, it's going to blow up soon. And I'm just about finished the print I'm doing on it. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about updates as well to the CR10. I'm going to do a complete show on maybe why you don't want to do upgrades to a printer when you first get it. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive to the community, but after having the CR10 now for a week or two, I guess I've had it almost 2 weeks, I'm finding that you don't need to go out and do a bunch of add-ons to get this thing to work really well. I have not tried it with, of course, any other materials but PLA. I know that I have to do some upgrading to it if I want to run different materials. That would be a reason for upgrading. I see way too many 3D printing shows that show that they're not satisfied with their printer until they've done a bunch of upgrades. And I really want people to get to know the printers that they have before they go out and start spending enormous amounts of money on upgrades, because it's not, in a lot of cases, it's not necessary. But that's for a whole nother show, and we're going to talk about that.
There's an interesting question on Facebook right now. Franco Descala, he says, my Cura doesn't allow me to load more than one object on the build plate.
Doesn't allow you to load more than one.
Doesn't allow him to load more than one. I've heard this question before, but I've never seen it answered properly because it's kind of an odd issue.
Well, we loaded on this version of Cura. Let's go back to my desktop. And I just want to shift this up. There we go. And we loaded, you can see there up on the top of my screen, we loaded 2 separate files. Now I'll get rid of these 2. Right now, we'll delete both of them. All right, and let's just go and open up we'll open up those 2 files again. What I'm doing here is I'm clicking the first one, I am holding my control key, and I'm clicking the second one as well. So if you look down in the file names, it says Marvin Fett legs and Marvin Fett head. Now if I click open, it should open both of those files as you can see it did on the screen. And now it's going to slice it, and it says 26 minutes to print that. So try doing that and see if it will open up any of your issues. All right.
Fred thinks we changed our start time, but why would he think that?
Probably because we're not starting as early as we used to. The reason that, Fred, we're not starting 10 minutes early like we were before, because it was taking away from the length of the show, because I found myself discussing show topics in the pre-show, and then we're losing viewers by the time we get to the opening. You know, that first 10 minutes, you know, once people know what we're talking about, if they're not interested in it, they don't stick around. So I want to try and get them past the opening so they stick around a little bit longer. Have you done a kit build? Not on the show, but I have built several kits. If that's something you guys would like to see on the show, please leave me a comment down below, either on Facebook or on YouTube, and we will get a kit in here and we'll build a kit from scratch. How's that sound?
Woo! I mean, I'm in.
We should set up the CR10 kit.
CR10 kit? We've already done the CR10 kit.
It takes 5 minutes.
Yeah, it takes 10 minutes. Yeah. Brian, am I missing any more questions?
I'm just checking that out, and I don't think so. There's some comments, but no questions.
Okay.
Brian Baker says he'd gladly show his Frankenprinter off to show why you may want to hold back on some of those upgrades.
Jess, can you pass me that Frankenprinter on the floor? Right in front of my desk here.
Oh, we've got a Frankenprinter coming up.
We're going to bring this Frankenprinter up here. Let's get that off of there. So, this was originally a Hicktop 3D P08. This is one I am rebuilding. Okay, so if you're interested in a Franken printer, this we can use this as a kit once I have all the new parts printed and some of the new extrusion cut, and we can use this as a kit because it's basically the same thing.
Also, I know that Colin has a A6 that's not assembled yet.
Oh,
You can get him to bring it in and have him.
look at that. We might be able to assemble an A6 at some point in time. So if you guys want to see that, that would be awesome. So let's take care of some business. We have to take care of business always. Listen, if you like this show and you like the content that we're producing here, consider subscribing to us on YouTube and hit that bell notification so that you get notified every time that we do a brand new episode or we do a live stream. Also, become a part of our community over on Facebook. It's the First Layer on Facebook. It's pretty easy to find us. And we approve everybody for the most part. We don't have anybody that we don't approve. I want to thank our good friends here at spool3d.ca. Spool3D, as everybody knows, provides us with this space. And sometimes they even provide us with some leftover filament that they might have. And I got to tell you, if you are looking for printers, parts, filaments, accessories, spool3d.ca is the place to go. So print it right, print it with spool3d.ca. Now, what else do I gotta take care of? Oh yeah, hey listen, if you like the content, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/thefirstlayer. It's always appreciated, and I do drink coffee, and sometimes I spike my coffee. And we've had people that have bought me a coffee so that I can spike my coffee because they think I'm better drunk. I don't know why. But if you want to be a more permanent member of our support team, you can go over to Patreon at patreon.com. And we have a couple of different levels that you can get involved in. Right now we are doing the Your Thank You Brick campaign. So everybody who has contributed to us either through Buy Me a Coffee or through Patreon, we are doing the brick campaign. So I'm going to make a brick with your name on it, and we're going to fill this wall back here with bricks. That's my goal. So I appreciate that. And finally, what else? I think that's it.
Not everybody, man.
Yeah, I think that's it. So we've got Frank on the controls now. Jess is over here grabbing stuff for me.
Kind of tag teaming a little bit.
They're tag teaming a little bit.
Yeah.
And Jess and Frank are going to be working together for the next little while. Then they're going to switch off. So one day we may have Frank, one day we may have Jess.
You're never going to know.
You're never going to know. It's going to be a strange, yeah, it's going to be a strange surprise. So listen, you guys, it is Monday. It's the start of the week. Get something on your printer, get printing. If you've got any problems, you can certainly reach me through our Facebook group, or you can reach me through my email. You can send questions to me at richard@thefirstlayer.com. And speaking of thefirstlayer.com, our website is being worked on by my lovely wife Geraldine, who is starting to port over all of our videos and get that done. If there is something that you want to send into the show, you can certainly do that. And that address is number 230 11929 40th Street Southeast in Calgary, Alberta. And it is down below there. All of the addresses and everything. If you want want me to show something on the show, you can send it to that address. And until next time, you guys, remember, the First Layer is the foundation for every good print. So I will see you again on Wednesday.